Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. The Knicks, they're at a crossroads. This West Coast trip that they're on, 4 games, isn't just about wins and losses. It's also about clarity. And right now, they've taken 2 out of their last 3, and maybe, just maybe, they've started to steady themselves. Now, in recent weeks, we've seen the defense has slipped a bit, lineups have changed. Injuries, they're part of the story, as well as fatigue, but so is accountability. And this week, we're going to ask the question Knicks fans have been wrestling with. No more excuses here. What are the Knicks really right now? So let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Joining me now for the first time on New York Got Game is someone who studies his team as closely as anyone. He's also a fellow Brooklynite, and he's an alum of the best middle school in the world, the great Philippa Schuyler Middle School for the gifted and talented. The one and only Mensa Smith of Knicks Film School joins me now. Mensa, what's going on, my guy? How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here with you guys for the first time. Just ready to talk some Knicks basketball and get into whatever else comes up.
Yeah, no, good time to talk to you because it's been an interesting time for the Knicks this season. And Mensa, at this point in the season, we're 39 games in, especially heading into the final 2 games of this road trip where the Knicks are 1-1 after their win over the Trailblazers on Sunday. Do you feel like the Knicks are still discovering themselves, or are they just telling us actively who they really are right now?
Well, I would hope they're not discovering themselves. This is a basketball team that's trying to win a championship, and you kind of have to know who you are. I think what we're seeing here is the New York Knicks are going through a period in their schedule where it's the dog days of January. They just won the NBA Cup, coming off that high. They're going through the emotional highs and lows of the season, as well as having a really interesting schedule where, since after the NBA Cup, and this is going to be a theme here, after the NBA Cup, the New York Knicks have played on either one day of rest or on a back-to-back for 15 straight games now. So 14 or 15. But that's what we're really seeing, is we're seeing a fatigued basketball team, and we're watching them, I guess, find new elements of themselves. And as they're going through the fatigue, it's kind of you never rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training, and we're seeing the Knicks sink to their level. So they're probably rediscovering some new things about themselves, but I think this is a team that knows who they are. They're just going through a rough path in the schedule.
All right, so going through a rough patch in the schedule, you heard Mensa right there mention the word fatigue. That's something we're going to come back to. I want to talk about that in a little bit more depth in a second. But one thing we have seen, Mensa, is we've seen the defensive drop for the Knicks, right? We've seen it drop off in recent weeks. When you look at the film, is the Knicks' defensive decline more about effort and execution, or is it exposing a roster that just isn't built to defend at a high level right now? Which one is it for you?
So for me, I think the New York Knicks, they're getting one of the best seasons of Karl-Anthony Towns' career defensively as far as the impact metrics go. So when you have that, and you have guys like OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges who are the linchpin in your defense, and you're throwing a Mitchell Robinson in there, a Deuce McBride at the point of attack, and a good wing defender in Josh Hart, it's really about they're coming around Jalen Brunson. And right now, we're seeing that they're 18th in defensive efficiency, and that's kind of where you want this Knicks team to be so long as the offense is working. Right now, the offense is 4th in the NBA in terms of offensive efficiency. Those stats will probably update after tonight's game, but what we're seeing, I believe, is a team that has enough to defend. They have a good point of attack defender in Deuce McBride. They have Karl-Anthony Towns, who's giving you a really good defensive season. I know it doesn't look that way all the time because of the foolish fouls, but more often than not, he's not in the wrong position. And what we're seeing from him is another elite defensive rebounding season. One thing I love to tell people is that a defensive possession does not end until you get that rebound. So having a great defensive rebounder like Karl-Anthony Towns really does help. But what I believe we are seeing right now is this team is just, you're coming up. Fatigue isn't just, you're tired and you're a step slow. Sometimes fatigue can be mental, and sometimes you're not quite as locked in. I think that what we're seeing with the New York Knicks right now is a bit of that mental fatigue, which is bringing them down a bit. But I personally am hopeful because I think Deuce McBride's a great defender. I think the Knicks have 2 of the best wing defenders in the NBA in Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. And when you're getting a season like Karl-Anthony Towns is giving you, you're really only covering for Jalen Brunson, who's the Knicks' worst defender in the starting lineup, and one of the worst defenders in the NBA, if we're being completely honest. What we're seeing is when you're not necessarily having to cover for Karl-Anthony Towns because he's holding his own defensively, and you have Mitchell Robinson coming in, you're getting 48 minutes of good center minutes defensively. It's just, how can we cover for Jalen Brunson? And I think as the Knicks go through the season and a guy like Miles McBride gets more comfortable in his role, and the Knicks continue to just gel and grow, the defense will fix itself. I think the New York Knicks have enough to defend at a championship level.
So, Mensa, I just want to be clear. When we talk about defending at a championship level, we haven't seen a team, below 12th in defensive rating, right, win an NBA championship. Do you think this team has the ability to get into the top 12 by the end of the season, or dare I say by the end of the season, play, top 10-ish defense in the NBA? Do you think they have the talent to actually do that?
Absolutely. I think they have the talent to lock in for sure. It just depends on how we deploy these lineups now, because you're going to need, if Miles McBride, OG Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges share the court often, if that is a popular three-man lineup for the New York Knicks, if they're on the floor a lot, you're going to have elite point of attack defense. You're probably going to have Karl-Anthony Towns or Mitchell Robinson back there. And then you have, in my opinion, Mikal Bridges in his best role, which is at that off-ball support role. And then OG Anunoby as an agent of chaos, being one of the best guys in stock steals and blocks in the NBA. So as long as you have those four guys, as long as you have those three guys, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby playing enough minutes, the Knicks defense can rise. It's just we're seeing that where they're really being hurt right now, in my opinion, is Jalen Brunson. He is in the first percentile in defensive EPM. So what that means is he's one of the 5 to 10 worst defenders in the NBA who qualify for that stat. And when you have a guy who's leading your team in minutes in Jalen Brunson, not quite leading, but one of the minutes leaders, it's hard for a defense to recover. But once you take that out, it's really, when I say take that out, I don't necessarily mean once, because he's a big part of what we do here. But once you take that into context and you look at what the rest of the team is able to do, I think the New York Knicks have enough defenders to get us into that top 12, or to at least play in the playoffs, to lock up and play some really good defense.
I do think you bring up a good point that hasn't been talked about enough. A lot of times when defense is talked about, you'll hear a lot that, hey, the Knicks are playing with two weak defenders in the starting lineup, Karl-Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson. You just noted the struggles with Jalen Brunson. And we all, again, I want to be clear about what you're saying. What I'm saying, we all laud. We know what the captain does and what he brings offensively. We know all that. I think the thing you brought up that was really good is Karl-Anthony Towns has been pretty solid defensively pretty much since the first month of the season. You looked at it through that NBA Cup run. He has not been part of the problem. Now, we know about the silly fouls. You mentioned that too. We know about the silly fouls with him, and that can be problematic. But if the Knicks can get the effort they've been getting out of him on defense, it could be really good. One of the things I'm also going to mention now, Mensa, that you talked about is the point of attack defense. And how much of the problem of what we've seen starts at the point of attack? How much of that can be solved with Deuce taking on a bigger role, as we've seen lately, especially when Josh Hart was out? And do the Knicks currently have enough players that can actually stay in front of the ball that this is something you don't think you'll be worrying about with the Knicks come towards the end of the regular season?
So the unfortunate answer is no. The New York Knicks, in my opinion, have one good point of attack defender, and that is Deuce McBride. What we've seen from Mikal Bridges in the past, like 2022, 2023, when he was in Phoenix, was he was one of the best point of attack defenders in the NBA, finishing as the runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, specifically because of what he was able to do at the point of attack. But that is no longer who Mikal Bridges is. So it's sort of like the Knicks have to get by as when Deuce McBride is not on the court. And some guys in the NBA are just so good it doesn't matter who is at the point of attack. Like we saw against Philadelphia, Tyrese Maxey was roasting whoever was in front of him, and Deuce McBride is no bad defender at the point of attack. He couldn't stop a guy like Tyrese Maxey. But luckily for the New York Knicks, and luckily for the New York Knicks and the way they play the game, if you look at the best players and the guys that the Knicks will have to go through in terms of getting to an NBA championship, all those guys are 6'6" and above, which plays right into OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges' strength, as long as they're not guys that are 6'4" and below, which is more like a Tyrese Maxey, a Kyrie Irving who's sidelined, a Ja Morant who's not quite in the playoff picture right now, guys like Cade Cunningham, guys like Jaylen Brown, guys like Shai Gilgeous. Those guys you can trust an OG Anunoby and a Mikal Bridges to get by on. Obviously, these are some of the best players in the NBA, so you limit what they do, you don't stop it. But when it comes to the Knicks having a strength, it's not the point of attack. Their strength is going to be defensive rebounding, offensive rebounding, and then those wing defenders who create chaos in the passing lanes and just with their help side defense.
Yeah, it definitely has not been the strength of the Knicks thus far this season in terms of the point of attack defense. I want to talk to you about Mitchell Robinson because you also talked about him being a key part of the Knicks defense, but there's still so much uncertainty with him in his future, not just in his contract, right? We know he's looking for an extension. Him and the Knicks have been part on that. He could be a free agent coming up this summer, but then also you don't know what you're getting from him in terms of playing on the court, right? He's not playing in back-to-backs. We even saw a stretch towards the end of 2025 where he didn't play in a couple of games that weren't back-to-backs. How does his uncertain future complicate the Knicks thinking both defensively and then also structurally moving forward for what he can bring to this team? Because Mensa, you know this, he's incredibly valuable in what he brings to the team, but that uncertain future kind of complicates things a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, so with the Leon Rose era, it's kind of been they've never quite taken a lame duck player, a player whose contract is set to expire,
Yep.
who matters to the team. They've never quite taken that past the NBA, past the trade deadline. They've always traded you. We've seen it with Emmanuel Quickly, who did not agree to an extension. He got traded. Julius Randle did not agree to an extension. He got traded. But I think what's different about this season as opposed to those seasons prior is the Knicks view themselves as a true blue contender. So it would make less sense for the Knicks to try to think about 2027, 2028, when in 2026 you have a chance to win a championship. Let Mitchell Robinson be Mitchell Robinson. He's a top 3 offensive rebounder in the game of basketball. Off the top of my head, the only guys who I think can do better than him is Steven Adams, and that's really it. So I'm giving top 3 just to be generous. I could be forgetting a player or two, but when it comes to what Mitchell Robinson brings to the table as an offensive rebounder, if you were watching the game tonight against Portland, you would have seen that the last 9 to 10 minutes of the game, karl-Anthony Towns did not play. They went with Mitchell Robinson for a great stretch of that, and then OG Anunoby to close. Mitchell Robinson is extremely valuable to what this team does, and if you're not going to get a better player, which is going to be really difficult considering his contract, the way they structured it is descending, so I think it's about $12-13 million this year. If you're not going to get a better player, and chances are you're not, especially with what Mitchell Robinson brings, that unique offensive rebounding advantage, you don't find many players who bring that. I think that they have to figure that out in the offseason. Right now, you have to lock in. Let Mitchell Robinson be Mitch. Let him be your rim protector. Let him affect the glass on the offensive rebounding, and then what they're doing to keep him engaged on the defensive side, because he has kind of been not his best on the defensive side as far as like what he's done through the season, through his career as a Knick, I should say. They're throwing him lobs now. They're getting him engaged on the offensive end to keep him up. So it's kind of like you need to load manage Mitch so that you get the best version of him, the version that we saw in 2023 against the Cleveland Cavaliers, where he can win a series for you by himself or almost by himself on the offensive rebounding. You need to get that guy into the playoffs. So you keep him healthy, you limit his minutes, you figure that out, and then once you know that you have a healthy Mitchell Robinson, you unleash hell on the NBA come playoff time.
All right, that's what Knicks and Knicks fans are hoping for. Mitchell Robinson can absolutely be healthy come playoff time. I want to talk to you about Deuce McBride, Mensa, because we've seen him, I mentioned this earlier, take on a larger role. We've seen him in the starting lineup when Josh Hart was out. What are you seeing with him that feels real and sustainable right now? Or are there things about his game that you think maybe could get exposed with more minutes? Do you like what you're seeing out of Deuce, and do you think this is sustainable, what we've seen for him, I'd say, since he returned from injury?
So I love what I'm seeing from Deuce McBride, and I absolutely do believe that it is sustainable. Shout out to my guy Chris Persianen over here at Knicks Film School, and with a couple other platforms like Clutch Points and Locked On Knicks. He's pretty much everywhere these days. He's a great kid. He told us, I think he's reported this actually, that Deuce McBride, before he was really getting minutes with the New York Knicks, the Knicks, because they have one of the best statistical like tracking data, like their data tracking system is some of the best, and they carry that over into their practice facility. Deuce McBride was one of the best shooters in practice for the New York Knicks. So we're seeing what he was practicing and what he was doing up in Westchester starting to come into fruition, as this is one of the 10 to 15 best shooters in the league this year. I love to see that from Deuce. He's earning his minutes, and then he's giving you a little bit of creation juice. Deuce McBride at his best kind of looks like Deuce Van Vliet out there, right? Like he's giving you that two-way basketball that we love to see. And I think that as the Knicks' primary point of attack defender, he's invaluable for what we do. We don't have to worry about the contract. We know it's one of the best in the game. Right now, we're talking about what Deuce brings to the court, and Deuce McBride is hitting 4 to 5 threes a night since he's come back from his injury. didn't have that great a shooting night tonight against Portland, but he's been one of the most consistent shooters in the NBA, one of the best point of attack defenders, and he gives you a little secondary, tertiary creation juice. He can shoot from the mid range, so if you run him off the 3-point line, it's not like he can't hit you with a step back and get to the mid range and drive on you. It's not like he can't get to the rim because we've seen him dunk on people in the past. I think Deuce McBride, age 25 season, we're seeing a guy who's entering the prime of his career, and it couldn't be better time for the New York Knicks. I'm all in on Deuce McBride. I think he's one of the best players that we have, and he's a testament to the New York Knicks development system.
Yeah, which sometimes doesn't get enough credit. And, one of the questions you're going to have now, Mensa, about Deuce McBride is, do you give an extension? Do you extend him? Still got another year left on that deal. You talked about how great he is. What do they do with that? That's going to be very interesting to watch with the Knicks going forward. Deuce has got a lot of minutes since when Josh Hart was out. Josh Hart returned against the Portland Trail Blazers on Sunday. Josh Hart, he looked good offensively in that Knicks offense with 18 points in the contest. There's a lot of belief that his return could change the feel of this team and some of the struggles we've seen at the top of this year. But when you look at this and you look at the game on Sunday against the Blazers, what specifically does his return fix? And do you think his impact to this Knicks roster has been undervalued or properly valued? What do you say?
So I think he's properly valued by the New York Knicks. Knicks fans, I try not to get into how we feel about it because we run hot and cold. One day we love a guy, next day we want him traded to Milwaukee. That's just who we are. But as far as what he brings to the table, I think it's less about what he necessarily brings, because while we do know that he is a key component and he is the Knicks full court offense pretty much by himself, the way he'll grab a rebound and go down, either get fouled, find somebody in the 3-point line, or just take it straight to the basket. We love what he does for us in the full court. What he also offers is you're giving minutes to an NBA wing as opposed to Kevin McCullough, who's a great story, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm disparaging Kevin McCullough. He's just not quite ready to be a rotation player on an NBA contender. Just think about that sentence. Rotation player, NBA contender. You're talking about a guy a team that is relying to win an NBA championship. Can that team rely on you for 15 to 20 minutes? That's not quite Kevin McCullough Jr. yet. Maybe in year 3, maybe in year 4, but as of right now, it's not. The New York Knicks are getting, like, when you have to go deeper in your bench, the quality of the play drops, right? So Kevin McCullough Jr., while I love him, he's not quite a guy that you want to see for more than 5 to 8 minutes a night. A guy like Mohamed Diawara, also a great story for the New York Knicks, 51st pick in the draft. We love him. Not quite ready to contend. So what Josh Hart brings is he gives you stability where while you may get a great game from Kevin McCullough Jr. one night, the other 3 games, you're not going to have that. That's what your veterans bring. They bring consistency. Josh Hart tonight also against the Portland Trail Blazers, what we saw and what kind of gives me, I want to say, confidence, is he played some really good defense on Denny Avdia. Defense that we haven't quite seen, an intensity level that we have not quite seen from the New York Knicks so far, because he's the one New York Knick who's been resting. The other guys have been playing every other night or in back-to-backs, right? Mm-hmm. So what Josh Hart represents, he represents energy, he represents a full-court basketball player, and he's getting them shots up and he's hitting them, which is really encouraging. We need a great 3-point shooting season from Josh Hart. The Knicks really want to hit their zenith, right? But what he also represents is we're not talking about the 11th man, the 12th man, the 13th man, because once you start relying on that, as much as we don't like to talk about it, health is paramount in the NBA. So Josh Hart coming back, we're getting a little healthier. Getting healthy at the right time, I think, is more important than anything Josh Hart brings, because while he may bring a really, really vital element to the Knicks, it's you want your best players out there at all times, especially in crunch time, and Josh Hart being back, one of the Knicks' 5 to 6 best players on the team. That means the Knicks are going to get better basketball from better players, which is going to protect that roster, which is going to protect that record, I should say, and get us favorable matchups going into the playoffs.
Yeah, no, and I think I think you're right in him being properly valued, and you saw how much value he has to the offense. You just saw how things even flowed a little bit easier with him, just being able to create those easy transition buckets, his energy on the boards, and only had 3 rebounds against the Blazers, but we know what he can do there, too, as one of the best pound-for-pound rebounders in the NBA. So, Mensa, something that you said earlier that kind of gets to where I wanted to go next, because I've been talking to some fans when I'm at games, members of the media as well, too, and I've heard the point that, hey, during this recent stretch, I'm talking about since the NBA Cup, the Knicks haven't been fully healthy, for one. Fatigue has also been mentioned, another factor that you brought up. Talked about their recent stretch in the last 15 days or so. They're about to get 2 days off now, between now and Wednesday. But some people may say, those are excuses, right? So I'm going to ask you this. At what point does we haven't been fully healthy or the Knicks are fatigued stop being context and start becoming an excuse for some of the struggles that we've seen from them over the past couple of weeks? Is there a point where, it would have been a concern for you? I know they've won 2 out of their last 3 games coming into us having this conversation. Would there have been a point where you said, okay, I'm going to throw the fatigue, I'm going to throw the health out the window, and it would have been a concern? Or are you just saying, hey, no, this is a real part of the schedule. These are the dog days, and we could talk about it and, have a real conversation that sometimes teams just go through this?
Yeah, so I want to make it very clear. There is never a time where that will be an excuse for the New York Knicks. You're a contender. You have to figure it out. And more importantly than anything else, you hired Mike Brown so that it wouldn't be an excuse. You hired Mike Brown because he was going to go deep into that rotation. And credit to him, we do see Tyler Kolek, Kevin McCullough, Mohamed Diawara, guys that the New York Knicks found in the second round and later getting minutes for the team. But again, it's not an excuse for a team. It is always context, right? Because when you're talking about an NBA contender, right, these are guys who are thinking about May and June basketball. Sometimes you overlook the dog days of the season. You overlook that deep winter stretch. And when you overlook that deep winter stretch, you don't quite have as much hunger in your belly because you've been to an Eastern Conference Finals last year. You've been to the Eastern Conference semis. You're winning playoff round after playoff round. You're in a successful era. You're not quite worried about, okay, how are we going to seed up against this guy or that guy? So they overlook NBA players, and I'm not going to speak for them, but it does get to a place where you see the Oklahoma City Thunder lose to the Charlotte Hornets, right? You're seeing it happen across the NBA. It gives you context that, the dog days of the season are a real thing. These guys are human beings. But it doesn't excuse the fact that you go out against Detroit and you don't show up on national television, right? These are things that we don't excuse, but we do have to understand, is what I would say. You don't want to excuse it, but you do want to understand what's actually happening so that you can protect yourself emotionally from, the ups and downs of a season. I don't want people crashing out over a 31-point loss to the Detroit Pistons when, if you ask yourself, if the Knicks match up against the Pistons in the playoffs, who are you taking? I'm putting my money on New York. And I'm not thinking about it twice. So I think what you have to do, what's most important, is make sure that the basketball that you are watching, you have to ask yourself, are these problems that are emblematic of a New York Knicks team that will show up in a playoff run? Or is this just, hey, the Knicks really didn't have it tonight. They've been playing back-to-backs on one day of rest for a month now. These guys aren't playing their best basketball. You're starting to see the variance, right? And when you're playing the type of basketball the New York Knicks want to play, which they want to shoot a lot of threes, you're going to see some variance in the schedule. You're going to see some variance in the performances. What you want to do is you want to say, hey, are those rotations still tight as far as Mike Brown? Are the New York Knicks playing basketball that they can rely on? Are they running sets that get them easy baskets? Are they keeping themselves fresh? Are they keeping themselves healthy? And are they practicing things, or they're experimenting with lineups that will be useful to them down the stretch of a season? So when it comes to the New York Knicks and who they are, you don't want to get too bogged down in the middle of the schedule, right? You look at where they are and you want to make sure that they're keeping pace with the rest of the NBA as far as the other contenders, and that their record doesn't fall below. They're not, in a place where, hey, you're trending down 5th, 6th in the conference. You want to make sure that, the downturns don't last too long. And credit to the New York Knicks, they did pick themselves up off the mat, and they won 2 of their last 3 games. And that's what's most important, is how is this team going to rebound to adversity? They're being faced with some adversity. How are they going to respond to that? Is this a team that's going to roll over? Are they going to have a soft underbelly? Or are they going to toughen up? They're going to get through it, and they're not going to make an excuse of a schedule that every other team in the NBA is dealing with.
No, I think that was a great answer, because I felt like after the Detroit game, and I know you saw this, there was not a lot of people, let me take that back. There were some people, some fans that were, they were ready to crash out, Mensa. They were ready to crash out. Oh, it's over. They've lost 4 games in a row. And listen, I heard Mike Brown talk about the adversity before the Detroit game and understood all that. And I agree. I think responding to adversity is important. And I think how the Knicks have responded to this, they've won 2 out of the last 3. They easily could have won the game in Phoenix if they had made some shots. I thought they played some good defense in the fourth quarter of that one. But I think you make a good point. You have to look at everything in totality. You have to look at everything in context of where the Knicks are. So I'm glad to know you weren't crashing out about the Knicks after the Detroit loss, where they lost 4 in a row, because no matter how good your team is, and I'm so glad you brought up teams like the Thunder, the defending NBA champions, they're, I believe, 6 and 7 in their last 13 games or whatever it may be. They've been playing 500 basketball. The Rockets have been going through a little bit of a struggle recently. You've seen this from teams, so the Knicks were going to have their turn. Now it's interesting to see what they do with it as they get healthier, as they're playing different rotations, all that good stuff. I appreciate your answer because I think all the context matters in terms of looking at where the Knicks are. But let's do this. A couple more things for you. When you zoom out from things right now, you look at this roster, right? And I saw you at a couple months ago at a Knicks film school watch party, and we were talking about stuff they might need at the trade deadline. You and I were talking about that. But when you look at this roster, does it feel like it needs, some sort of tweak? A specialist, maybe something? I don't feel like you're going to be this drastic. Maybe something more drastic or uncomfortable at the trade deadline. What do you think this team might need if they're going to do something at the trade deadline?
So I think the New York Knicks are going to get a guy like Landry Shamet back, which will make us look a lot better. But to answer your question, I think the Knicks, if they can find opportunity to get a wing basketball player, I think there was a report by Mark Stein that the New York Knicks are putting Gershon Yabusele and Pacome Dadier on the trade block, which is about $8.3 million in salary. So you're not necessarily going to get like an upper end wing, but if you can get some wing depth, because right now as the Knicks starting five is constructed with Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Karl-Anthony Towns, you're playing all of your wings in the starting lineup, which gives you a bit of trouble with the rotation throughout the game. So if you can get a fourth wing, I like a guy like I think the Champagny brother in Washington, not the one in San Antonio. He's not going anywhere. But if you can get a guy like that, if you can get none of the guys in maybe like a Sadiq Bey in New Orleans, if you can get a player like that can help you out with your rotation just to add another body there. But as far as when I think about the New York Knicks, what they will need to win a championship, you need shot creation. You have that in Jalen Brunson, and then you don't necessarily have a secondary shot creator because your second best offensive basketball player is a big, and you have to feed him. But you also have Mikal Bridges who shows you something. So you have shot creation, and we've seen them. They've been tested, tried and true in the playoffs. They can win 2 playoff series. So you have enough shot creation. Do you have rebounding? You have, in my estimation, an elite defensive rebounder in Karl-Anthony Towns, an elite offensive rebounder in Mitchell Robinson, and one of the best pound-for-pound rebounders, as you said, in Josh Hart. So you have rebounding. You can stop possessions. You have shot creation. Do you have defense? Yes, you have guys like Mikal Bridges, and you have OG Anunoby, who can get stops on anybody when you need them. They're some of the most clutch defenders in the NBA. I know we don't necessarily recognize that as a stat or as an ability, but OG Anunoby has shown to be nails this regular season, and we saw last year in the playoffs what Mikal Bridges did. So you have your defense, you have rebounding, you have shot creation. Do you have three-point shooting? You absolutely do. You have Karl-Anthony Towns. You have Deuce McBride, one of the 10 to 15 best shooters in the NBA. You have Landry Shamet coming back. You have basically everybody but Mitchell Robinson can hit a three when you need it in your rotation. So if you ask me, the New York Knicks have everything that they need to go out there and win a championship this season. It's just, will they optimize it? Will they stay healthy? Will they get favorable matchups in the playoffs? But if the Knicks do not make a trade at the deadline, I do not think that changes their outlook. I think they should still be favored as the team to come out of the Eastern Conference. And depending on who they play, if they come out of the Eastern Conference into the NBA Finals, they should have a shot to beat anybody.
So when we had spoke at that Knicks film school watch party, I remember you told me, you said, yeah, I think they need wing depth. And I found that to be very interesting at the time because when I talked to a lot of people, some people were like, hey, well, I think the Knicks need to get a backup point guard. That answer might have been solved with the way Tyler Kolek's played. I know he's a DNP against the Blazers. And some other people will say, oh, they need another big just in case Mitch gets hurt or something of that nature, all of which I understand. I tend to agree with you. I think wing depth is where they need because, like you said, 3 of the wings are in the starting lineup, especially if you start Josh Hart. It would be nice. Hadn't thought about Justin Champagny, guy who went to my alma mater, University of Pittsburgh. Would like to see him there. 24 years old, can play a little D, active, athletic. I could see that. That's a good name.
Yeah,
That's a good name.
He's playing on a team that does not want to win basketball games.
Do not.
So Hey, come on down. Come back to New York. I know he went to Bishop Loughlin,
That's right.
not too far from where I'm from in Bed-Stuy.
Yep.
A guy who I'd love to see. I love to root for New Yorkers on basketball teams. I just think that it gives you a different grit. So I know a player that a lot of people like is Jose Alvarado. While I don't quite think we need a Jose Alvarado because, like you said, Tyler Kolek has shown up and
Yep.
Deuce McBride play some of those minutes at the one. I would love to see a Puerto Rican kid from Brooklyn come to Madison Square Garden and really shake things up and really give us a little more gusto. So I look, if you could get a native New Yorker that makes sense, that would make me the most happy. But as far as what the Knicks need, I think as far as like if they needed to make a trade, it would be for a wing. Absolutely. So Justin Champagnie would be my favorite, and a guy like Sadiq Bey who went to Villanova, right? So
Yep.
you can never go wrong with a Villanova grad with the New York Knicks, right? So
Nah.
those are my two names right there: Justin Champagnie and Sadiq Bey.
Yeah, no, I like those two names. I'm going to keep an eye on that. Justin Champagnie is in the locker room. Deuce McBride will Pitt West Virginia rivalry in there. I'll have to talk to those guys about that. That'll be kind of interesting. Everybody knows what side I'm on. No disrespect to Deuce. You know what side I'm on. Now, let me ask you one other thing, and this kind of ties into the last thing, Mensa, because we talked about the Knicks' defensive issues, and some of that could be tied to the fatigue and everything with the dog days of the schedule and all that. The little slip that we've seen them go from about 12th to 18th in the league in terms of defensive ratings. If they're serious about fixing those defensive issues, do you think that's something, maybe whether it's a trade for Sadiq Bey or Justin Champagnie, do you think that's something with a trade like that could be achievable to fix that problem at the deadline? Or do you look at that as more of an offseason issue? I guess not for you because you think this defense can get better by the end of the year, but do you think a trade for a wing, if we're just particularly talking about what you said you think the team should do you think that could help them shore up some of the defensive issues that we've seen?
So when I look at the stats, because I try not to get too bogged down into, what I feel and what I'm watching, because, as an emotional fan, I'm gonna key in on things that, that the data trackers will not be, and they'll give us the entire picture here. So when I look at a guy like OG Anunoby, good defender, Josh Hart, good defender, good rebounder, karl-Anthony Towns, elite rebounder, having a good defensive season, OG Anunoby, Miles McBride, guys like that, you don't necessarily like if you're making a trade at the deadline for the salary slots, and we have to keep that in context here, the salary slot, you're probably not going to get a better defender than any of the guys that I just named. The problem with the defense, if you ask me, is Jalen Brunson being a first percentile defender. And that is not something that you can fix unless Jalen Brunson decides to, get more charges, be in position. What I find with Jalen Brunson is often he's a step late in his rotations, and that's how we end up giving up threes. That's one of the Knicks' biggest ailments is just the amount of threes that they've been giving up. Like we were just talking about the Julian Champagnie, he lit us up from three, right? Because we kept, being late on the rotations there. And so basically what I'm trying to say is I don't know if there is a trade that will help the Knicks necessarily become a better defensive team because I like their defensive pieces. And like if let's say you make a trade for a wing, right? Is he going to be much better defensively than OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges? No. If let's say you make a trade for a defensive big, is he going to be a much better defender than Mitchell Robinson? Probably not. You make a trade for a backup point guard, yeah, you can get better defensively than Tyler Kolek and Jalen Brunson, but the rest of the picture that we're talking about here with your wings and your front court players which support Jalen Brunson, and this entire thing is built around him, right? If you get guys like that, essentially you're not necessarily going to improve because in order to improve, you have to get like guys who are going to change the minutes played. So when it comes down to it, if you get a backup point guard who improves your defense in the regular season, how much value does that really have in the playoffs when a guy like Jalen Brunson is going to be logging 38 to 40 minutes a night, right? It's not necessarily a thing that I think they need as far as a defensive improvement. They just need to know that when it's crunch time, is Jalen Brunson going to be where he needs to be? And I was very encouraged with what Jalen Brunson did in the playoffs defensively, specifically against the Boston Celtics, and that I think he really guarded up a wing or two. Like he played really good defense when they tried to isolate him on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and I think that is more important than anything that we're going to see in the regular season. If Jalen Brunson can go from being a first percentile defender and really ramp it up and be slightly below average. That's all the Knicks need defensively because everybody else will be where they need to be.
That would be a huge improvement for him, and you're right. That's what would matter at the time when it comes to the postseason for Jalen Brunson there to improve that Knicks defense. Last thing for me, Mensa, and I kind of want to do this, and we kind of touched on this a little earlier, but I do think you can put a nice final bow on this for me because I think some of the times when I look at this as a sports journalist, I'm like, sometimes for fans, and I always say, like, I'm a fan too. Like, you watch sports, love sports, all this stuff. Sometimes we have information very recently to not overreact, right? And I saw some Knicks fans ready to jump out the window, ready to crash out when they had the 4-game losing streak. But I said to myself, I remember last year when the Knicks, they couldn't beat Boston. They couldn't beat Cleveland. Right? Remember that? Oh, they're 0-4 against
0-10 against the top
that, right?
whoever teams.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And everybody's, well, they're not going to do anything in the playoffs. That's what you heard from some people. They're not going to do anything in the playoffs. And then what happened? They went out, they beat Boston, right? You saw that happen, right? So what I want to do to close this out, I'm going to ask you this. When we look at the bottom line here and we go back and look at this recent stretch of games and the rough start to 2026, the adversity that you talked about, Mensa. Do you think that this will be the moment that fans realize that the Knicks were maybe closer to contending or true contender that they didn't realize? Or you think they'll be like, oh, it's closer to a hard truth and this team is maybe not as good as they thought the Knicks would be? What do you think that Knicks fans are going to think when they look back at this moment to start 2026, this portion of the season and the adversity this team faced? How do you think they'll evaluate this when they look back at the stretch?
So I think fans are going to do what they have always done as soon as this guy's come on the team. They're going to look at it as either the time that Karl-Anthony Towns really locked in, and I think we're seeing that from him in this recent stretch of games. We're seeing really good basketball from him as far as the consistency. We're seeing more. We're not necessarily getting the peaks, but we're also not getting those valleys either. I think that's what the fans are going to look at. They're not going to question if Jalen Brunson was locked in. They're not necessarily going to question if OG Anunoby was there. They like to get on Mikal Bridges too because he was traded for 5 first-round picks. But what it boils down to is, are fans going to see when they look back at this and where Karl-Anthony Towns is playing, because that he had this one soundbite where they asked him about like the adjustment that he's been having, and I thought he answered honestly, but the body language wasn't the best. Where he said, he leaned on his experience because he's never really had coaching consistency. So adjusting to what Mike Brown wants from him is also just something that he's just leaning on his experience with, just figuring out because he's had to deal with it so many different times. But what fans are going to see as far as are they closer to contention or are they closer to a hard truth? It's really going to be Karl-Anthony Towns. Is this guy going to be consistent for us? Is Mikal Bridges going to be consistent for us? Is this team going to find consistency? And all we're going to know is when we look back, like you said, in May and June and possibly July, did the Knicks in this January stretch find consistency? And I think that not having the breaks, not having, long layoff, having a game every other day the way they have, is giving them a chance to see themselves at their worst. And if you can see yourself at your worst, and if you can honestly diagnose your issues, and you can get a fix going into the All-Star break and really finishing out strong through the playoff, the end of the regular season, that playoff stretch between March and April, if they can figure that out, if they can get consistency, then again, it's not necessarily, in my opinion, a personnel thing. It's where's their mindset going into the playoffs? Are they going to finish strong or are they going to coast? If they coast, fans are going to say, oh, I knew it. They were closer to a harsh reality. We need the guy in Milwaukee. We need a trade. But if they find consistency, Knicks fans are going to ride with these guys. And I think that's all it has to be. Let's find some consistency because the pieces are here. They have enough to get to an NBA Finals and even win an NBA championship.
All right, let's see if they are able to do that. Look, we'll see. It's a long road. There's a lot to find out in the regular season. There's always going to be some adversity, some ups and downs, but the sky's not falling. You don't have to crash out yet. The Knicks have won 2 out of their last 3 games. There are 2 more games left on this road trip in which they are 1-1 right now. So an interesting week coming up for the New York Knicks. That is Mensa Smith. Check him out, Knicks Film School. Also, Mensa, we got it done. Two of the best from Philippa Schuyler Middle School You know,
yes,
on,
sir.
on the same
383
show,
in the house.
383 in the house, talking about the
Yes,
Knicks.
sir.
To whom much is given, much is required. If you know, you know. That's what I'll say. Mensa, big fan of your work. Glad we got to chop it up a couple months ago, and I told you we'd come on here and do it. So I'm glad you gave me some time to talk some Knicks, man. I appreciate you, and we'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah, man. Hopefully we do it before the Mets sign Kyle Tucker. The way that's been going.
That's another topic from my other show, Straight Outta Flushing, and the Mets offseason. The Mets fans. You want to talk about crashing out and going out the window?
Oh, there is no window anymore.
Oh, the window's gone.
The window's gone. The walls are gone. The walls are burning down. It's madness over there.
It's madness, and nobody knows what's going to happen. At least in Knicks land, it's not, for now, it's not madness. And man, I'm glad you are well. Again, everybody, check out Mensa Knicks Film School, the great work they do there. I'm Dexter Henry. That's going to do it for this edition of New York Got Game. We'll catch you next time.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.